こんにちは。こんにちは。こんにちは。こんにちは。こんにちは。今日はドラキュラ。Today is going to be Dracula. Hello. Oh, Project Ice Skate. No, it's Project Indigo. Ice Skate's the name of the character. I fixed a part of his code yesterday. How am I today? I'm good. How are you? So, まだ準備してる。Today, I want to read Dracula. The last page the last chapter I have bookmarked is chapter 7. I'll make the background music a little louder. A bit better now. Body was strained from 4 hours of manual head streaming, so he's just been relaxing since. That's good. Be sure to relax. Yes. Tomorrow is Friday, so that'll be music. After about 2 more minutes, we'll start. Probably try to sleep and leave the stream on. Thank you. Be sure to rest. And Saturday I can work on code again. Saturday will be Project Indigo, and then Sunday will be the dictionary. Might as well start now. Might as well start reading now. Okay. So this is what I have bookmarked last. One greatest and sudden storms. One greatest and suddenest storms on record has just been experienced here, with results both strange and unique. The weather had been somewhat sultry, but not to any degree uncommon in the month of August. Saturday evening was fine as it ever was, was ever known, and the great body of holidaymakers laid out yesterday for visits to Mulgrave Woods, Robin Hood's Bay, Rig Mills, Brunswick, States, and the various trips in the neighborhood of Whitby. Streamers Emma and Scarborough made trips up and down the coast, and there was an unusual amount of tripping, both to and from Whitby. The day was unusually fine till the afternoon, when some of the gossips who frequent the East Cliff churchyard and from the commanding eminence watched the wide sweep of sea visible to the north and east. North and east called attention to the sudden show of mare's tails high in the sky to the northwest. The wind was then blowing from the southwest in the mild degree which in barometrical language is ranked number 2, light breeze. The Coast Guard on duty at once made report, and the old fisherman who for more than half a century has kept watch on weather signs from the East Cliff foretold in an emphatic manner the coming of a sudden storm. The approach sunset was so very beautiful, so grand in masses of splendidly colored clouds, that there was quite an assemblage on the walk along the cliff in the old churchyard to enjoy the beauty. Before the sun dipped below the black mass of Kettleness, standing boldly toward the western sky, its downward way was marked by a myriad clouds of every sunset color, flame, purple, pink, green, violet, and all the tints of gold, with here and there masses not large, but of seemingly absolute blackness, in all sorts of shapes, as well outlined as colossal silhouettes. The experience was not lost on the painters, and doubtless some of the sketches of the prelude to the great storm will grace the RA and the IA walls in May next. More than one captain made up his mind, and then and there, that his cobble, or his mule, as they termed the different classes of boats, would remain in the harbor till the storm has passed. The wind fell entirely during the evening, and at midnight there was a dead calm, a sultry heat, that prevailing intensity which on the approach of thunder affects the persons of a sensitive nature. There were but a few lights in the sea, for even the coast extremers, which usually hug the shore so closely, kept well to seaward, and but a few fishing boats were in sight. The only sail noticeable was a foreign schooner, with all sails set, which was seemingly going westwards. The foolhardiness or ignorance of her officers was a prolific theme for comment. While she remained in sight, and efforts were made to signal her to reduce sail in face of her danger. Before the night shut down, she was seen with sails idly flapping as she gently rolled on the undulating swell of the sea. As idle as painted ship upon a painted ocean. Shortly before 10 o'clock, the stillness of the air grew quite oppressive, and the silence was so marked that the bleating of a sheep inland or the barking of a dog in the town was distinctly heard, and the band on the pier, with its lively French air, was like a discord in the great harmony of nature's silence. A little after midnight came a strange sound from over the sea, and high overhead the air began to carry a strange, faint, hollow booming. Then without warning, the tempest broke, with a rapidity which at the time seemed incredible, and even afterwards is impossible to realize. The whole aspect of nature at once became convulsed. The waves rose in growing fury, each overtopping its fellow, till in a very few minutes the lately glassy sea was like a roaring and devouring monster. White-crested waves beat madly on the level sands, and rushed up the shelving cliffs. Others broke over the piers, and with their spoons swept the lanterns of the lighthouses, which arose from the end of either pier of Whitby Harbor. The wind roared like thunder, and blew with such force that it was with difficulty that even strong men kept their feet or clung with grim clasps to the iron stanchions. It was found necessary to clear the entire piers from the mass of onlookers, or else the fatalities of the night would have been increased manifold. To add to the difficulties and dangers of the time, masses of sea fog came drifting inland, white wet clouds which swept by in ghostly fashion, so dank and damp and cold that it needed but little effort of imagination to think that the spirits of those lost at sea were touching their living brethren with the clammy hands of death, and many a one shuddered as the wreaths of sea mist swept by. At times the mist cleared, and the sea for some distance could be seen in the glare of the lightning, which now came thick and fast. Followed by such sudden peals of thunder, the whole sky overhead seemed trembling under shock of the footsteps of the storm. Some of the scenes thus revealed were of immeasurable grandeur and of absorbing interest. The sea running mountains high through skywards with each wave, mighty masses of white foam, with the tempest seemed to snatch and whirl away into space. Here and there a fishing boat, with a rag of sail, running madly for shelter before the blast. Now and again the white wings of a storm-tossed seabird. On the summit of the east cliff, the new searchlight was ready for experiment, but had not yet been tried. The officers in charge of it got it into working order, and the pauses of the inrushing mist swept with it. The surface of the sea, once or twice its service, was most effective, as when a fishing boat with gunwale under water rushed into the harbor, able by the guidance of the sheltering light to avoid danger of dashing it against the piers. As each boat achieved the safety of the port, there was a shout of joy from the mass of people on shore, a shout which for a moment seemed to leave the gale, and was then swept away in its rush. Before long, the searchlight discovered some distance away a schooner with the sails set, apparently the same vessel which had been noticed earlier in the evening. The wind had by this time backed to the east, and there was a shudder among the watchers on the cliff as they realized the terrible danger in which she now was. Between her and the port lay the great flat reef on which so many good ships have from time to time suffered. With the wind blowing from its present quarter, it would be quite impossible that she should fetch the entrance of the harbor. It was now nearly the hour of the high tide, but the waves were so great that in their throes the shallows of the shore were almost visible. The schooner, with all sail set, was rushing with such speed that, in the words of one old salt, she must fetch up somewhere. If it was only hell, then came another rush of sea fog, greater than any hitherto. A mass of dank mist, which seemed to close on all things like a great pall, and left available to men only the organ of hearing. The roar of the tempest, and the crash of the thunder, and the booming of the mighty billows came through the damp oblivion, even louder than before. The rays of the searchlight were kept fixed on the harbor. Mouth across the east pier, where the shock was expected, the men waited breathless. The wind suddenly shifted to the northeast, and the remnant of the sea fog melted in the blast, and then Mirabel dictu between the piers, leaping from wave to wave as it rushed at headlong speed. The rusted headlong speed swept a strange schooner before the blast. With all sails set and gained the safety of the harbor, the searchlight followed her with a shudder ran through all who saw her. For lashed to the helm was a corpse, with a drooping head which swung horribly to and fro at each motion of the ship. No other form could be seen on deck at all. A great awe came in on all, as they realized that the ship was, as if by a miracle, had found the harbor, unsteered, saved by the hand of a dead man. However, all took place more quickly than it takes to write these words. The schooner paused but rushing across the harbor, pitched herself on that accumulation of sand and gravel, washed by many tides and many storms into the southeast corner of the pier jutting under the east cliff, known as Tate Hill Pier. There was a course of considerable concussion as the vessel drove off on the sand heap. Every spar, rope, and stay was strained, and in some of the top hammer came crashing down. But strangest of all, at the very instant, the shore was touched, and an immense dog sprang up from a deck from below. As if shot up by the concussion and running forward, jumped from the bowl on the sand, making straight for the steep cliff, where the churchyard hangs over the laneway to the east pier, so steeply that some of the flat tombstones, thrusteens, or through stones, as they call them in the Whitby vernacular, actually protect over where the sustaining cliff has fallen away. It disappeared in darkness, which seemed intensified just beyond the focus of the searchlight. It so happened that there was no one at the moment on Tate Hill Pier, as all those whose houses are in close proximity were either in bed or were out on the heights above. Thus the Coast Guard on duty on the eastern side of the harbor, who at once ran down the little pier, was the first to climb on board. The men working the searchlight, after scouring the entrance of the harbor without seeing anything, then turned on the light, derelict, and kept it there. The Coast Guard ran aft. When he came beside the wheel, bent over to examine it, and recoiled at once as though under some sudden emotion. This seemed to pique general curiosity, and quite a number of people began to run. It is a good way round from the west cliff by the drawbridge to Tate Hill Pier, but your correspondent is a fairly good runner and came well ahead of the crowd. When I arrived, however, I found already assembled at the pier a crowd, whom the Coast Guard and police refused to allow to come on board, but the courtesy of the chief boatman, I was, as your correspondent, permitted to climb on deck, and was one of a small group who saw the dead seaman, whilst actually lashed to the wheel. It was no wonder that the Coast Guard was surprised, or even awed, for not often such a sight has been seen. The man was simply fastened by his own hands, tied one over the other, to a spoke of the wheel. Between the inner hand and the wood was a crucifix, the set of beads on which it was fastened being around both wrists and wheel, and kept fast by the binding cords. The poor fellow had been seated at one time, but the flapping and buffeting of the sails had worked through the rudder of the wheel, and dragged him to and fro, so that the cords with which he was tied had cut the flesh and bone. Accurate note was made of the state of things, and a doctor, Surgeon J.M. Caffin, of 33 East Elliot Place, who came immediately after me, declared after making examination that the man must have been dead for quite 2 days. In his pocket was a bottle carefully corked empty, save for a little roll of paper. which proved to be the addendum to the log. The Coast Guard said the man must have tied up his own hands, fastening the knots with his teeth. The fact that the Coast Guard was the first on board may save some complications later on in the Admiralty Court, for Coast Guards cannot claim a salvage, which is the right of the first civilian entering on a derelict. However, the legal tongues are wagging, and one young law student is loudly asserting that the rights of the owner are already completely sacrificed, his property being held in contravention of the statutes of mortmain. Since the tiller, as emblemship, if not proof of delegated possession, is held in the head of a dead hand, it is needless to say that the dead steersman has been reverently removed from the place where he held his honorable watch and ward till death. A steadfastness as noble as that of the young Casabianca, and placed it in the mortuary to await inquest. Already the sudden storm is passing, and its fierceness is abating. Crowds are scattering homewards, and the sky is beginning to redden over the Yorkshire wolds. I shall send in some in time for your next issue, further detail of the derelict ship, which found our way so miraculously into the harbor of the storm. Would be August 9th. The sequel to the strange arrival of the derelict in the storm last night is almost more startling than the thing itself. Turns out that the schooner is a Russian from Varna and is called the Demeter. She is almost entirely in glass of silver sand, with only a small amount of cargo. A number of great wooden boxes filled with mold. This cargo was co-signed to a would-be solicitor, Mr. S.F. Billington of 7 Crescent, who this morning went aboard and formally took possession of the goods co-signed to him. The Russian consul, too, acting for the charter party, took formal possession of the ship and paid all harbor dues, etc. Nothing is talked about here today except the strange coincidence. The officials of the Board of Trade have been most exacting in seeing that every compliance has been made with existing regulations. As the matter is to be a 9 days wonder, they are evidently determined that there shall be no cause of after complaint. A good deal of interest was abroad concerning the dog which landed when the ship struck, and more than a few of the members of the SPCA, which was very strong in Whitby, had tried to befriend the animal. To the general disappointment, however, it was not to be found. It seems to have disappeared entirely from the town. It may be that it was frightened and made its way to the moors, where it is still hiding in terror. There are some who look with dread on such a possibility, lest later on it should be in itself become danger for her. Evidently a fierce brute. Early this morning, a large dog, a half-bred mastiff, belonging to a coal merchant close to Tate Hilpia, was found dead in the roadway opposite to the master's yard. It had been fighting and manifestly had a savage opponent, for its throat had torn away and its belly was slit open as if with a savage claw. Later, by the kindness of the Board of Trade Inspector, I have been permitted to look over the long logbook of the Demeter, which was in order up to within 3 days, but it contained nothing of special interest except as to facts of missing men. The greatest interest, however, is with regard to the paper found in the bottle, which was today produced at the inquest, and a more strange narrative than the two between them unfold. It has not been my lot to come across. There is no more There is no motive for concealment, and I am permitted to use them, and accordingly send you a script, simply omitting technical details of seamanship and supercargo. It almost seems as though the captain had been seized in some kind of mania before he had got well into blue water, and that this had developed persistently throughout the voyage. Of course, my statement must be taken cum grano, since I am writing from the dictation of the clerk of the Rest and Console, who kindly translated for me, the time being short. Let me fix this. Chocolate. That's better. What are you searching for? Oh. Written 18th of July, things so strange happening, that I shall keep accurate note henceforth till we land. On 6th of July, we finished taking in cargo, silver, sand, and boxes of earth. At noon set sail, east wind fresh, crew 5 hands, 2 mates, cook, and myself, the captain. On 11th of July, at dawn entered Bosphorus, boarded by Turkish customs officers. Bakshish, all correct, underway at 4 p.m. On 12th of July, through Dardanelles, more custom officers, and a flagboat of guarding squadron. Bakshish again. Work of officers thorough, but quick. Want us off soon. A dark passed into Archipelago. On 13th of July, past Cape Metapon. Crew dissatisfied about something, seemed scared, but would not speak out. On 14th of July, was somewhat anxious about crew. Men all steady fellows who sailed with me before. Mate could not make out what was wrong. They only told him there was something, and crossed themselves. Mate lost temper with one of them that day and struck him. Expected fierce quarrel, but all was quiet. On 16th of July, Mate reported in the morning that one of the crew, Petrovsky, was missing. Could not account for it. Took larboard, watched 8 bells last night, was relieved by Abramov, but did not go to bunk. Men more downcast than ever. All said they expected something of the kind, but would not say more. There was something aboard. Mate getting very impatient with them. Feared some trouble ahead. On 17th of July, yesterday one of the men, Olgarin, came to my cabin and in awestruck way confided to me that he thought there was a strange man aboard the ship. He said that in some of his watch he had been sheltering behind the deck house as there was a rainstorm. When he saw a tall, thin man who was not like any of the crew, came up to the companionway and go along the deck forward and disappear. He followed cautiously, but when he got to the bows, found no one, and the hatchways were all closed. He was in panic of superstitious fear, and I am afraid that panic may spread. To allay it, I shall today search for the entire ship, carefully from stem to stern. Later in the day, I got together with the whole crew and told them, as they evidently thought that there was someone on the ship, we would search from stem to stern. I want to make sure that... Stem to stern. First mate angry, said it was folly to yield to such foolish ideas. I would demoralize the men. Said he would engage to keep them out of trouble with a handspike. I let him take the helm, while the rest began through the search, all keeping abreast with lanterns. We left no corner unsearched, as there was only the big wooden boxes. There were no odd corners where a man could hide. Men set much relieved when search over. I went back to work, cheerfully. First mate scowled, but said nothing. "22nd of July. Rough weather last 3 days, and all hands busy with sails. No time to be frightened. Men seem to have forgotten their dread. Made cheerful again, and all on good terms. Praised men for work in bad weather. Praised Gilbraltar and out through straits. All well. 25th of July. 24th, I mean. There seems some doom over this ship. Already a hand short and entering on the Bay Biscay with wild weather ahead. And yet last night, another man lost, disappeared, like the first. When he came off his watch and was not seen again. Men all in panic of fear, sent around Robin asking to have doubled watch, as they fear to be alone. Mate angry. Fear there may be some trouble, as either he or the men will do some violence. 28th of July. 4 days in hell. Knocking about in sort of a maelstrom, and the wind a tempest. No sleep for anyone. Men all worn out. Hardly know how to set up watch since no one fit to go on. Second mate volunteered to steer. I watch and let men snatch a few hours of sleep. Wind abating. Sea still terrific. But feel them less as ship is steadier. Another tragedy had single watch tonight. As crew too tired to double. When warning watch came on deck, could find no one except steersman. Raced out quiet, and all came on deck. Thorough search, but no one found. Are now without second mate and crew in a panic. Mate and I agreed to go armed henceforth, and wait for any sign of cause. 30th of July. Last night rejoiced we are nearing England. Weathering fine, and all sails set. Retired, worn out. Slept soundly awake, by mate telling me that both men of watch and steersman missing. Only self and mate and 2 hands left to work a ship. First of August. 2 days of fog, not a sail sighted. Had hoped when in the English Channel to be able to signal for help to get somewhere. Not having power to work sails, have to run before wind. Dare not lower, as could not raise them against. We seem to be drifting to some terrible doom. Mate now more demoralized than either of men. His stronger nature seemed to have worked inwardly against himself. Men are beyond fear, working stolidly and patiently with minds made up to worse. They are Russian, Romanian. 2nd of August, midnight. Woke up from a minute's sleep by hearing a cry seemingly outside my port. Could see nothing in fog, rushed on deck, and men against mate tells me heard crying, ran, but no sign of man on watch. One more gone. Lord help us. Mate says we must be past straits of Dover. As in a moment of fog lifting, he saw North Foreland, just as he heard the man cry out. So we are now off in the North Sea, and only God can guide us in the fog. It seems to move on with us, and God seems to have deserted us. August 3rd. At midnight, I went to relieve the man at the wheel, and when I got it to it, I found no one there. The wind was steady, and as we ran before, there was no yawning. I dared not to leave it, so I shouted for the mate. After a few seconds, he rushed up to deck in his flannels. He looked wild-eyed and haggard, and I greatly feared his reason has given way. He came close to me and whispered hoarsely with his mouth to my ears, as though fearing the very air might hear. It is here. I know it now. On the watch last night, I saw it, like a man, tall and thin, ghastly pale. It was in the bows and looking out. I crept behind it and gave it my knife, but the knife went through it, empty as air. As he spoke, he took his knife and dove it savagely into space. He then went on, but it is here, and I'll find it. It is in the hold, perhaps in one of the boxes. I'll unscrew them one by one and see. You work the helm. And with a warning look and his finger on his lip, he went below. There was a springing up a choppy wind, and I could not leave the helm. I saw him come out on deck again with a tool chest and lantern, and go down to the forward hatchway. He is mad, stark raving mad, and it's no use trying to stop him. He can't hurt those big boxes. They are invoiced as clay, and to pull them about is as harmless as thing as can do. So here I stay, and mind the helm, and write these notes. I can only trust in God and wait till the fog clears. And if I can't steer to any harbor in the wind, that is, I shall cut down the sails and lie by and signal for help. It is nearly all over. It is nearly all over now, just as I was beginning to hope that the mate would come out calmer, for I heard him knocking away at something in the hold, and work is good for him. There came up the hatchway a sudden, startled scream, which made my blood run cold, and up on the deck he came as if shot from a gun, a raging madman in his eyes, falling on, and his face convulsed with fear. Save me, he cried, and then looked round the blanket of fog. His horror turned to despair. In a steady voice, he said, "You had better come too, Captain, before it is too late. He is there. I know the secret now. The sea will save me from him, and it is all that is left." Before I could say a word forward to seize him, he sprang to the bulwark and deliberately threw himself into the sea. I suppose I know the secret too. It was this madman who had got rid of the men one by one, now swallowed them himself. God help me, how am I supposed to account for all these horrors when I get to port? When I get to port? Will that ever be? August 4th, still fog, which the sunrise cannot pierce. I know there is a sunrise because I am a sailor. Why else I know not. I dared not go below. I dared not leave the helm. So here all night I stayed in the dark dimness of the night. I saw it. Him. God forgive me, but the mate was right to jump overboard. It was better to die like a man, to die like a sailor in blue water. No man can object. But I am captain, and I must not leave my ship. But I shall baffle this fiend or monster. For I shall tie my hands to the wheel. When my strength begins to fail along with him, I shall tie that which it dare not touch. And then come good wind or foul, I shall save my soul and my honor as a captain. I am growing weaker, and the night is coming on. He can look at me in the face. I may not have time to act. If we are wrecked, maybe this bottle may be found, and those who find him may understand. If not, Well, then all men shall know that I have been true to my trust, God and the Blessed Virgin, and the same helps the poor ignorant soul trying to do his duty. Of course, the verdict was an open one. There's no evidence to accuse. And whether or not the man himself committed the murders, there is now none to say. The folk here had almost universally that the captain is simply a hero, and he must be given a public funeral. Already it is arranged that his body is to be taken with the train of boats up the Esk for a piece, and then brought back to Tate Hill Pier, up the Abbey steps, for he is to be buried in the churchyard on the cliff. The owners of more than 100 boats have already given up in their names as wishing to follow him to the grave. No trace has ever been found of the great dog, at which there is much mourning for public opinion in its present state. He would, I believe, be adopted by the town. Tomorrow we'll see a funeral. And so will end this one more, Mystery of the Sea. August 8th. Lucy was very restless all night, and I too could not sleep. The storm was fearful as it boomed loudly in among the chimney posts. It made me shudder. When a sharp puff came, it seemed like a distant gun. Strangely enough, Lucy did not wake, but she got up twice and dressed herself. Fortunately, each time I woke in time to manage to undress her without waking her, and got her back to bed. It was a very strange thing, this sleepwalking, for as soon as her will is thwarted in any physical way, her intention, if there be any, disappears, and she yields herself almost exactly to the routine of her life. Early in the morning, we both got up and went down to the harbor to see. If anything had happened in the night, there were very few people about. Though the sun was bright and the air was clear and fresh, the big grim-looking waves that seemed dark themselves, because the foam had topped them, was like snow, forced themselves in through the narrow mouth of the harbor, like a bullying man going through a crowd. Somehow I felt glad that Jonathan was not on the sea last night, but on land. But oh, is he on land or sea? Where is he now and how? I am getting fearfully anxious about him. If only I knew what to do, if I could do anything. 10th of August. The funeral of the poor sea captain today was most touching. Every boat in the harbor seemed to be there, and the coffin was carried by captains all the way from Tate Hill Pier to the churchyard. Lucy came with me and went early to our old seat. Was a cortege of boats went up to the weather river to the viaduct and came down again. We had a lovely view and saw the procession nearly all the way. The poor fellow was laid to rest quite near our seat, so that we stood on it when the time came and saw everything. Poor Lucy seemed much upset. She was restless and uneasy at the time. I cannot but think that her dreaming at night is telling on her. She is quite odd in one thing. She will not admit to me that there is a case for any cause for restlessness, or if there be, she does not understand it herself. There's an additional cause in that poor old man, Mr. Swales, was found dead this morning in her seat, his neck being broken. He had evidently, as the doctor said, fallen back on the seat in some sort of fright. There was a sudden look of fear and horror on his face that the man said made them shudder. Poor dead old man. Perhaps he had seen death with his dying eyes. Lucy is so sweet and so sensitive. So sweet and sensitive. Lucy is so sweet and sensitive that she feels influences more acutely than other people do. Just now she was quite upset by a little thing which I did not much heed, though I am very myself fond of animals. One of the men came up here often for the boat, was followed by his dog. The dog is always with him. They are both quiet persons, and I never saw the man angry, nor heard the dog bark. During the service, the dog would not come up to its master, who was on the seat with us, but kept a few yards off, barking and howling. Its master spoke to us gently. His master spoke to it gently, and harshly, and angrily, but it would neither come nor cease to make a noise. It was in sort of a fury, with its eyes savage and all its hairs bristling out like a cat's tail when puss is on the warpath. Finally, the man too got angry, and jumped down and kicked the dog, and then took it by the scruff of the neck and dragged it half through it on the tombstone which the seat is fixed. The moment it touched the stone, the poor thing became quiet and fell into a tremble. It did not try to get away, but crouched down and quivering and cowering, and was in such a pitiable state of terror that I tried, though without effect, to comfort it. Lucy was full of pity too. She did not attempt to touch the dog, but looked at it in an agonized sort of way. I greatly fear that she too is of too supersensitive a nature to go through the world without trouble. She will be dreaming of this tonight, I'm sure. The whole agglomeration of the things. The ship steered into port by a dead man. His attitude, tied to the wheel, with a crucifix and beads. Touching funeral, a dog, and now the furious, and now in terror. Will all afford material for her dreams. I think it'll be best for her to go to bed tired out physically. I shall take her out for a long walk by the cliffs to Robin Hood's Bay and back. She ought to not have much inclination for sleepwalking then. I have tea today. I have green tea. Same day, 11 o'clock p.m. Oh, but I'm tired. If it were not that I had made my diary a duty, I shall not open it tonight. We had a lovely walk. Lucy, after a while, was in gay spirits, owning, I think, some dear cows who came nosing towards us in a field close to the lighthouse and frightened the wits out of us. I believe we forgot everything except, of course, personal fear, and it seemed to wipe the slate clean and gave us a fresh start. We had a capital sphere, tea, at Robin Hood's Bay in a sweet little old-fashioned inn, with a bow windowed right over the seaweed, covered rocks of the strand. I believe we should have shocked the new woman with our appetites. Men of war are tolerant, bless them. Then we walked home with some, or rather many, stoppages to rest. And with our hearts full of constant dread of wild bulls, Lucy was really tired, and we intended to creep off to bed as soon as we could. The young curate came in, however, and Mrs. Westenra asked them to stay for supper. Lucy and I had both a fight for it with the dusty miller. I know it was a hard fight on my part, and I'm quite heroic that I think someday on the bishops must get together and see how breeding up a new class of curates who don't take supper, no matter how they be pressed to it. Who will know when girls are tired. Lucy is asleep and breathing softly. She is more color in her cheeks than usual, and looks oh so sweet. If Mr. Helmwood fell in love with her, seeing her only in a drawing room, I wonder what he would say if he saw her now. Some of the new women writers will someday start an idea that men and women ought to be allowed to see each other asleep before proposing or accepting. But I suppose the new woman won't condescend in future to accept. She will do the proposing herself, and a nice job she will make of it. There's some consolation in that. I'm happy tonight because dear Lucy seems better. I really believe that she has turned the corner. We are over her troubles with dreaming. I should be quite happy if only I knew if Jonathan, God bless, and keep him. August, 3 a.m. Diary again. No sleep now. I may as well write. I'm too agitated to sleep. We have had such an adventure, such an agonizing experience. I fell asleep as soon as I closed my diary. Suddenly, I became broad awake, and sat up with a horrible sense of fear upon me, and some feeling of emptiness around me. The room was dark, so I could not see Lucy's bed. I stole across and felt for her. The bed was empty. I lit a match and found that she was not in the room. The door was empty. The door was shut, but not locked, as I had left it. I feared to wake her mother, who has been more than usually ill lately, so I threw on some clothes and got ready to look for her. As I was leaving the room, it struck me that the clothes she wore might give me some clue to her dreaming intention. Dressing gown would mean house, dress outside. Dressing gown and dress were both in their places. Thank God, I said to myself, she cannot be far, as she is only in her nightdress. I ran downstairs and looked in the sitting room. Not there. Then I looked again. Looked in the other room. Rooms of the house. With an ever-growing fear chilling in my heart, finally I came to the hall and found it open. It was not wide open, but the catch of the lock had not been caught. The people of the house are careful to lock the door every night, so I feared that Lucy must have gone out as she was. There was no time to think of what might happen. A vague, overmastering fear obscured all the details. I took a breath. I took a big, heavy shawl and ran out. The clock was striking as I was in the crescent, and there was not a soul in sight. I ran along the north terrace, but could see no sign of the white figure as I expected. At the edge of the west cliff, above the pier, I looked across the harbor to the east cliff, in hope or fear. I don't know which. Of seeing Lucy in our favorite seat. There was a bright full moon, with heavy black driving clouds, which threw the whole scene into a fleeting diorama of light and shade as they sailed across. For a moment or two, I forgot I say that. I don't know what to do. I don't know what to see Lucy in our favorite seat. There was a bright full moon, with heavy black driving clouds. It threw the whole scene into a fleeting diorama of light and shade as they sailed across. For a moment or two, I could see nothing, as the shadow of a cloud obscured St. Mary's Church and all around. Then, as the cloud passed, I could see the ruins of the abbey coming into view, and as the edge of a narrow band of light, as sharp as a sword, moves along the church, and the churchyard became gradually visible. Whatever my expectation was, it was not disappointed, for there, on our favorite seat, the silver light of the moon struck half a reclining figure, snowy white. The coming of the cloud was too quick for me to see much, for shadow shut down on light almost immediately, but it seemed to me as though something dark stood behind the seat where the white figure shone. and bent over it. What it was, whether man or beast, I could not tell. I did not wait to catch another glance, but flew down the steep steps to the pier, along the fish market to the bridge, which was the only way to reach the east cliff. The town seemed as dead as, for not a soul did I see. I rejoiced that it was so, for I wanted no witness of poor Lucy's condition. The time and distance seemed endless, and my knees trembled, and my breath came labored. As I toiled up this endless steps to the abbey, I must have gone fast, and it seemed to me as if my feet were weighted with lead, as though every joint of my body were rusty. When I got almost to the top, I could see the seat and the white figure, for I was now close enough to distinguish it even through the spells of shadows. There was undoubtedly something long and black bending over the half-reclining white figure. I called in fright, "Lucy! Lucy!" and something raised a head. And from there, I could see a white face with red, gleaming eyes. Lucy did not answer, and I ran to the entrance of the churchyard. As I entered the church, it was between me and the seat for a minute. And so I lost sight of her. When I came in view again, the cloud had passed, and the moonlight struck so brilliantly that I could see Lucy, half reclining with her head lying over her back of the seat. She was quite alone, and there was not a sign of any living thing about. When I bent over, I could see that she was still asleep. Her lips were parted, and she was breathing, so not softly as usual with her, but in long, heavy gasps, as though striving to get her lungs full at every breath. As I came close, she put up her hand in her sleep and pulled the collar of her nightdress close around her throat. Well, she did, so there came a little shudder through her, as though she felt the cold. I flung the warm shawl over her, and drew the edges tight around her neck, for I dreaded lest she should get some deadly chill from the night air. Unclad as she was, I feared to wake her all at once, so in order to have my hands free that I might help her, I fastened the shawl around her throat with a big safety pin. But I must have been clumsy in my anxiety, and pinched or pricked her. For by and by, when the breathing became quieter, she put her hand to her throat again and moaned. When I had her carefully wrapped up, I put my shoes on her feet and began to gently wake her. At first she did not respond, but gradually she became more and more uneasy in her sleep, moaning and sighing occasionally. At last, as time was passing fast, and for many reasons I wished to get her home at once, I shook her more forcibly till she finally opened her eyes and woke. She did not seem surprised to me, as, of course, she did not realize all at once where she was. Lucy wakes pretty prettily, and even at such time when her body must have been chilled with cold, and her mind somewhat appalled at waking. Unclad in a churchyard at night, she did not lose her grace. She trembled a little and clung to me. When I told her to come at once with me, she rose without a word, with the obedience of a child. We passed along the gravel. As we passed along, the gravel hurt my feet, and Lucy noticed me wince. She stopped and wanted to insist upon taking my shoes, but I would not. However, when we got to the pathway outside the churchyard, where there was a puddle of water remaining from the storm, I daubed my feet with mud, using each foot in turn, so that, as we went home, no one, in case we should meet any, should notice my bare feet. Fortune favored us. We got home without meeting a soul. Once we saw a man who seemed not quite sober passing along the street in front of us, but we hid in a door till he had disappeared upon opening. Such as there are here steep little closes, or wynds as they call them in Scotland. My heart beat so loud all the time that sometimes I thought I should faint. I was filled with anxiety about Lucy, not only for her health, but lest she should suffer from the exposure, but her reputation, in case the story should get wind. When we got in, and had washed our feet, and had said a prayer of thankfulness together, I tucked her into bed before falling asleep, and she asked, even implored, me not to say a word to anyone, even her mother, about her sleepwalking adventure. I hesitated at first to promise, but on thinking of the state of her mother's health, and how the knowledge of such a thing would fret her, and thinking too of how such a story might become disordered, nay, infallibly would, in case it should leak out, I thought it wise to do so. I hope I did right, and have locked the door, and the key is tied to my wrist, so perhaps I shall not be again disturbed. Lucy is sleeping soundly. The reflex of the dawn is high and far over the sea. Okay, that's good enough. Same day noon. All goes well. Lucy slept till I woke her, and seemed to not have changed her side. The adventure of the night does not seem to have harmed her. On the contrary, it has benefited her, for she looks better this morning than she has done for weeks. I was sorry to notice that my clumsiness with the safety pin hurt her. Indeed, it might have been serious, for the skin of her throat was pierced. It must have pinched if a piece of loose skin must have transfixed it there, for there were two little red points, like pinpricks, on the back band of her nightdress. It was a drop of blood, and I apologized and was concerned about it. She laughed and petted me, and said she did not feel it. Fortunately, it cannot leave a scar, as it is so tiny. Same day. Night. We passed a happy day. The air was clear and the sun bright. There was a cool breeze. We took our lunch to Mulgrave Woods. Mrs. Westerna driving by the road, and Lucy and I walking by the cliff path, joining her at the gate. I felt a little sad for myself, for I could not feel how absolutely happy it would have been had John been with me. But there, I must only be patient in the evening. We strolled into the casino terrace and heard some good music by Swan Mackenzie. I went to bed early. Lucy seems more restful than she has been for some time, and fell asleep at once. I shall lock the doors and secure the key, the same as the night before, though I did not expect any trouble tonight. My expectations were strong, for twice during the night I was wakened by Lucy trying to get out. She seemed, even in her sleep, to be a little impatient at finding the door shut, and went back to bed under a sort of protest. I woke with the dawn. I heard the birds chirping outside the window. Lucy awoke too, and I was glad to see it was even better than on the previous morning. All her gaiety and manner seemed to have come back, and she came and snuggled in beside me and told me all about Arthur. I told her how anxious I was about Jonathan, and she tried to comfort me. Well, she succeeded somewhat, for though sympathy can alter facts, it can help to make them more bearable. August 13th. Another quiet day, and to bed with the key on my wrist. As before, again I woke in the night and found Lucy sitting up in bed, still asleep. Pointing out to the window and got up quietly and pulling aside the blind. Looked out. It was brilliant moonlight. And the soft effect of light over the sea and sky, merged together in one great silent mystery, was beautiful beyond words. Between me and the moonlight fitted a great bat, coming and going in great whirling circles. Once or twice it came quite close, but was, I suppose, frightened at seeing me and flitted away across the harbor towards the abbey. When I came back from the window, Lucy had lain down again and was sleeping peacefully. She did not stir again all night. "14th of August. On the East Cliff, reading and writing all day, Lucy seems to have become much in love with the spot, as I am, and it is hard to get her away from it when it is time to come home for lunch or tea or dinner. This afternoon, she made a funny remark. We were coming home for dinner and had to come to the top of the steps from the West Piers and stop to look at the view as we generally do. The setting sun looked down in the sky and just dropping behind the kettle is. The red light was thrown over on the East Cliff and the old abbey and seemed to bathe everything in a mossy rosy glow. You were silent for a while, and suddenly Lucy murmured to herself, "His red eyes again. They are just the same." It was such an odd expression coming from the apropos of nothing that it quite startled me. I slewed around a little bit as to see Lucy, but without seeming to stare at her, and saw that she was in a half-dreamy state, with an odd look on her face that I could not quite make out. So I said nothing but followed her eyes. She appeared to be looking over at our own seat, wherein was a dark figure seated alone. I was a little startled myself, for it seemed in an instant as if the stranger had great eyes like burning flames. But second look dispelled the illusion. The red solid light was shining on the windows of St. Mary's Church behind our seat. And as the sun dipped, there was just a sufficient change in the refraction and reflection to make it appear as if the light moved. I called Lucy's attention to the peculiar effect. It may have been that she was thinking of that terrible night up there. We never referred to it, so I said nothing and we went home to dinner. Lucy had a headache and went to bed early. I saw her asleep and went out for a little stroll myself. I walked along the cliffs to the westward and was full of sweet sadness, for I was thinking of Jonathan. But when coming home, it was then that the bright moonlight was so bright though the front of our part of the crescent was in shadow, everything else could be seen. I threw a glance up at our window and saw Lucy's head leaning out. I thought that perhaps she was looking out for me, so I opened my handkerchief and waved it. She did not notice or make great movement whatever. Just then the moonlight crept around an angle of the building, and the light fell on the window. There distinctly was Lucy, with her head laying up against the side of the window sill, and her eyes shut. She was fast asleep, and by her seated on the windowsill was something that looked like a good-sized bird. I was afraid she might get a chill, so I ran upstairs and came into the room. She was moving back to her bed, as fast asleep, and breathing heavily. She was holding her hand up through her throat, as though to protect it from the cold. I did not wake her, but tucked her up warmly. I had taken care that the door is locked, and the windows securely fastened. She looks so sweet as she sleeps, but she is paler than is her wont, and there's a drawn, haggard look under her eyes, which I did not like. I fear she is fretting about something. I wish I could find out what it is. 15th of August. Rose later than usual. Lucy was languid and tired and slept on the floor. Slept on after we had been called. We had a happy surprise at breakfast. Arthur's father is better and wants the marriage to come off soon. Lucy is full of quiet joy, and her mother is glad and sorry at once. Later on in the day, she told me that the cause. She is grieved to lose Lucy as her very own, but she rejoiced that she is soon to have someone to protect her. Poor dear, sweet lady. She confided to me that she had got her death warrant, but she has not told Lucy and made me to promise secrecy. Her doctor told her that within a few months at most, she must die, for her heart is weakening. At any time now, even now, a sudden shock would be almost sure to kill her. Oh, you were wise to keep her from the affair of the dreadful night of Lucy's sleepwalking. "17th of August. No diary for 2 whole days. I have not had the heart to write. Some sort of shadow, pale, seems to be coming over our happiness. No news from Jonathan, and Lucy seems to be growing weaker, whilst her mother's hours are numbering to a close. I do not understand Lucy's fading away as she is doing. She eats well and sleeps well and enjoys the fresh air, but all the time the roses in her cheek are fading, and she gets weaker and weaker, more languid day by day. At night I hear her gasping as if for air. I keep the keys of our door always fastened to my wrist at all times. But she gets up and walks about the room and sits at the open window. Last night I found her leaning out. When I woke up, I tried to wake her, but I could not. She was in a faint. When I managed to restore her, she was as weak as water, and cried silently between long, painful struggles for breath. When I asked her how she came to be at the window, she shook her head and turned away. I trust her feeling ill may not be from that unlucky prick of the safety pin. I looked at her throat. Just now she lay asleep, and the tiny wounds seemed to not have healed. They are still open, and if anything, larger than before, and the edges of them are faintly white. They are like 2 little dots with red circles. Unless they heal within a day or 2, I shall insist on the doctor about seeing them. Letter. Samuel F. Billington and Son Solicitors, Whitby, Montrose, Carter and Patterson and Company in London. Dear Sirs, herewith please receive invoice of goods sent by the Great Northern Railway. Sent are to be delivered at Carfax, near Purfleet, immediately on receipt. At Good Station, King's Cross. The house is present empty, but enclosed please find keys, all of which are labeled. You will please deposit the boxes, 50 in number, which form the co-assignment in the partially ruined building forming part of the house, and marked A on rough diagram enclosed. Your agent will easily recognize the locality, as it's the ancient chapel and mansion. The goods leave by the train 9:30 tonight, and will be due at King's Cross at 4:30 tomorrow. As our client wishes, the delivery made as soon as possible. We shall be obliged by your having teams ready at King's Cross at the time named and forthwith conveying the goods to destination. In order to obviate delays, any routine requirements to payment in your departments, we enclose a check herewith for £10 receipt, which please acknowledge should be the charge be less than this amount. You can return the balance. If greater, we shall at once send check for different on hearing from you. You are to leave the keys on coming away in the main hall of the house. where the proprietor may get them on his entering the house by means of his duplicate key. Pray do not take us as exceeding the bounds of our business courtesy, in pressing you in all ways to use the utmost expedition. Your dear sirs, faithfully yours, Samuel F. Billington and Son. Dear sirs, we beg to acknowledge £10 received and to return check £1. 17 S9D. Amount of overplus shown in receipt account herewith. Goods are delivered in exact accordance. The goods are delivered in exact accordance with instructions, and key is left in parcel, and the main hall is directed. August 18th. I'm happy today. I'm writing sitting on the seat in the churchyard. Lucy is ever so much better. Last night she slept well all night and did not disturb me once. The roses seem coming back already to her cheeks, though she is still sadly pale and wan-looking, as if she were in any way anemic. I can understand it, but she is not. She is in gay spirits and full of life and cheerfulness. All the morbid reticence seems to have passed from her, and she is reminded me as if I needed any reminding of that night. And that it was here, on this very seat, I found her asleep, and she told me, tapped me playfully on the head. As she told me, she tapped me playfully with the heel of her boot on the stone slab and said, "My poor little peak didn't make much noise then." I dare say poor old Mr. Swales would have told me that it was because I didn't want to wake up Geordie. As she was in such a communicative humor, I asked her if she had dreamed at all that night. Before she answered, that sweet puckered look came into her forehead, which Arthur, I call him Arthur from her habit. She loves him, indeed. I don't wonder what she does. And she went on, half-dreaming sort of way, as if trying to recall it herself. I didn't quite dream, but it all seems real. I only wanted to be here in this spot. I don't know why, for I was afraid of something. I don't know what. I remember though, I suppose I was sleeping, passing through the streets over the bridge. A fish leaped as I went by, and I leaned over to look at it, and I heard a lot of dogs howling. The whole town seemed as if it must be full of dogs howling all at once. As I went up the steps, then I had a vague memory of something long and dark with red eyes, just as we went in the sunset, and something very sweet and bitter all around at once. Then I seemed sinking into deep green water, and there was a singing in my ears, and I have heard there is drowning men. And then everything seemed passing away from me. My soul seemed to go out from my body and float in the air. I seemed to remember that once in the West Lighthouse was right under me, and then there was a sort of agonizing feeling, as if I were in an earthquake, and I came back and found you shaking my body. I saw you do it before. I felt you. Then she began to laugh. It seemed a little uncanny to me, and I listened to her breathlessly. I did not like it, and thought it better not to keep her mind on the subject. So we drifted on to other subjects, and Lucy was like her old self again. When we got home, the fresh breeze had braced her up, and her pale cheeks were really more rosy. Her mother rejoiced when she saw her. We spent a very happy evening together. 19th of August. Joy, joy, joy. Although not all joy. At the last news of Jonathan, the dear fellow has been ill, and that is why he did not write. I am not afraid to think or say it. Now that I know Mr. Hawkins sent me on the letter, I wrote him and wrote himself. Oh, so kindly. I am to leave in the morning and go over to Jonathan to help to nurse him if necessary, and to bring him home. Mr. Hawkins says it would not be a bad thing if we were married out there. I have cried over the good sister's letter till I can feel it wet again against my bosom, where it lies. It is of Jonathan and must be next to my heart, for he is in my heart. My journey is all mapped out, and my luggage ready. I am only taking one change of dress. Lucy will bring my trunk to London and keep it till I send for it. It must be that. I must write no more. I must keep it to say Jonathan, my husband. The letter that he has seen and touched must comfort me till we meet. Letter, Sister Agatha, Hospital of St. Joseph, and St. Mary, Budapest, to Miss Wilhelmina Murray. Dear Madam, I write by the desire of Mr. Jonathan Harker, who is himself not strong enough to write. Though progressing well, thanks to God and St. Joseph and St. Mary, he has been under our care for nearly 6 weeks, suffering from violent brain fever. He wishes me to convey his love, and to say that by his post I write for him, to Mr. Peter Hawkins. It's easier to say within his dutiful responses that he is sorry for his delay, and that all of his work is completed. He will require some few weeks' rest in our sanatorium in the hills, but he will then return. He wishes me to say that he has not sufficient money with him, and he would like to pay for staying here, so that others shall not be wanting for help. Believe me, yours with sympathy and all blessings, Sister Agatha. P.S. My patient being asleep, I opened this to let you know something more. He has told me all about you, and you are shortly to be his wife, and blessings to both. He has had some fearful shock, and says our doctor, and in his delirium, his ravings have been dreadful, of wolves and poison and blood, of ghosts and demons. And I fear to say what. Be careful with him, and always that there may be nothing to excite him of this kind for a long time to come. The traces of such an illness as his do not lightly die away. We should have written long ago, but we know nothing of his friends, and there was on him nothing that anyone could understand. He came in the train from Klausenburg, and the guard was told by the station master that he was rushed into the station shouting for a ticket for home. Seeing from his violent demeanor that he was English, they gave him a ticket for the furthest station away, thither than the train reached. Be assured that he is well cared for. He has won all hearts by his sweetness and gentleness. He is truly getting on well, and I have no doubt, in a few weeks, will be all himself. But be careful for him, for safety's sake. There, I pray God and St. Joseph Mary. There, I pray God and St. Joseph to marry the many, many happy years for you both. I'm already tired. I didn't have any coffee this morning. How much of this is left? When we get here... Oh, you can't see it. When we get here, then I'll take a quick break. "19th of August. Strange and sudden change in Redfield last night. About 8 o'clock, he began to get excited and sniffed about as the dog does when setting. The attendant was struck by his manner, and knowing my interest in him, encouraged him to talk. He is usually respectful to the attendants, and at times civil. But tonight the man tells me that he was quite haughty, and would not consent to talk with him all night. All he would say was, 'I don't want to talk to you. You don't count now. The master is at hand.' The attendant thinks that it's some sudden form of religious mania which has seized him. If so, we should look out for squalls. For a strong man with the homicidal and religious mania at once might be dangerous. The combination is dreadful one. At 9 o'clock, I visited him again myself. His attitude to me was the same as that of the attendant in his sublime self-feeling. The difference between myself and the attendant seemed to him is nothing. It looks like religious mania, but you will soon think that he is God himself. These infinitesimal distinctions between man and man are too paltry for an omnipotent being. How these madmen give themselves away! The real God taketh heed lest his sparrow fall. But the God created from human vanity sees no difference between an eagle and a sparrow. Oh, if men only knew." For half an hour or more, Renfield getting excited in greater and greater degree. I did not pretend to be watching him, but I kept strict observation all the time. All at once, that shifty look came into his eyes, which we always see when a madman has seized an idea, and with it the shifting movements of the head and back which the silent attendants came to know so well. He became quite quiet, and went and sat on the edge of his bed, resignedly, and looked in space with lackluster eyes. I thought I would find out if his apathy were real or only assumed and tried to lead him to talk of his pets, a theme which had never failed to excite his attention. At first he made no reply, but at length said testily, "Bother them all. I don't care a pin about them." "What?" I said. "You don't mean to tell me that you don't care about spiders?" Spiders at present are his hobby, and the notebook is filling up with columns of small figures. To this he answered enigmatically, "The bridemaidens rejoice. The eyes that wait the coming of the bride. But when the bride draweth nigh, then the maidens shine not to the eyes that are filled." He would not explain himself, but remained obstinately seated on his bed all the time I remained with him. "I am weird tonight. and in low in spirits, but I cannot think of Lucy. I cannot but think of Lucy, and how different things might have been if I don't sleep at once. Chloral, the modern Morpheus. C2H... What's chlorine? Oh, H2O. H2O. Must be very careful not to let it grow into a habit. No, I shall take none tonight. I have thought of Lucy, and I shall not dishonor her by mixing the two. I need to be. Tonight shall be sleepless. Later, glad I made the resolution, gladder that I kept to it. I had lain tossing about, and heard the clock strike only twice. When the night watchman came to me, I sent up from the ward to say that Renfield has escaped. I threw on my clothes and ran down at once. My patient is too dangerous a person to be roaming about. Those ideas of his might work out dangerously to strangers. The attendant was waiting for me. He said he had not seen him 10 minutes before, seemingly asleep in his bed. When he had looked through the observation trap of the door, his attention was called by the sound of the wind being wrenched out. He ran back and saw his feet disappear through the window, and at once set up for me. He was only in the night gear, and cannot be far off. The attendant thought it might be more useful to watch where he should go than to follow him. He might lose sight of him whilst getting out of the building by the door. He's a bulky man and couldn't get through the window. I am thin, so with his aid I got out, but with feet foremost, as if we were only a few feet above the ground. I did not hurt. The attendant told me that the patient had gone to the left and had taken a straight line, so I ran quickly as I could. As I got through the belt of trees, I saw a white figure scale the high wall which separates our grounds from those of the deserted houses. I ran back at once and told the watchman to get 2 or 3 or 4 men. I told the watchman to get 3 or 4 men immediately and follow me into the grounds of Carfax. In case our friend might be dangerous, I got a ladder myself, and crossing the wall, dropped down on the other side. I could see Renfield's figure just disappearing behind the angle of the house. So I ran after him. On the far side of the house, I found him pressed close against the old iron-bound oak door of the chapel. He was talking, apparently, to someone, but I was afraid to go near enough to hear what he was saying, lest I might frighten him, and he should run off. Chasing an errant swarm of bees is nothing to following a naked lunatic, and the fit of escaping is upon him. After a few minutes, however, I could see that he did not take any note of anything around him, so I ventured to draw near him. The more so as my men had now crossed the wall and were closing him in. I heard him say, "I am here to do your bidding, master. I am your slave, and you will reward me for I shall be faithful. I have worshipped you long from afar off. Now that you are near, I await your commands, and you will not pass me by. You will, dear master, in your distribution of good things." He is a selfish old beggar, anyhow. He thinks of the loaves and fishes, even when he believes he is the real presence. Your maniacs make a startling combination. When we closed in on him, he fought like a tiger. He is immensely strong, for he was more like a wild beast than a man. I never saw a lunatic in such a paroxysm of rage before. and I hope I shall not again. It is mercy that we have found his strength in his danger in good time. With strength and determination like his, he must have done wild work before he was caged. He is safe now, at any rate. Jack Shepherd himself could not get free from him the street waistcoat that keeps him restrained, and he is chained to the walls in a padded room. His cries are at times awful, but the silences that follow are more deadly still, for he means murder in every turn and movement. Just now he spoke coherent words for the first time. I shall be patient, master. It is coming, coming, coming. So I took the hint and I was too excited to sleep, but this diary has quieted me, and I feel I shall get some sleep tonight. I'm gonna take a quick break. I'm back. I'm gonna find different background music. What about this one? I typed in spooky Nintendo music. My dearest Lucy, I know you will be anxious to hear all that has happened since we parted on the railway station at Whitby. Oh, my dear, I got the hull all right and caught the boat to Hamburg. And then the train on here. I felt that I can hardly recall anything of the journey, except I knew I was coming to Jonathan, and that I should have to do some nursing. I had better get all the sleep I could. I found my dear one, also thin and pale and weak-looking. All the resolution has gone from his dear eyes. A quiet dignity, which I told you was in his face, had vanished. He is only a wreck of himself. And he does not remember anything that has happened to him for a long time past. At least he wants me to believe so. I shall never ask. He's had some sort of terrible shock, and I fear it might tax his poor brain, if you try to recall it. Sister Agatha, who is a great creature and is born nurse, tells me that he raved of dreadful things whilst he was off his head. I wanted her to tell me what they were, but she would only cross herself and say she would never tell. That the ravings of the sick were the secrets of God, and that if a nurse thought through her vocation should hear them, she should respect her trust. She is a sweet, good soul, and the next day when she saw I was troubled, she opened up the subject again, and after saying she could never mention what my poor dear raved about, added, I can tell you this much, my dear, that it was not about anything which he has done wrong himself, and you and his wife-to-be have no cause to be concerned. He had not forgotten you or what he owes you. His fear was of great and terrible things, which no mortal can treat of. I do believe that the dear soul thought I might be jealous, lest my poor dear should have fallen in love with any other girl. The idea of my being jealous of Jonathan. And yet, my dear, let me whisper, I felt a thrill of joy, though when I knew that no other woman was the cause of trouble. I am now sitting by his bedside, where I can see his face while he sleeps. He is waking. When he woke, he asked me for his coat, as if he wanted to get something from the pocket. I asked Sister Agatha, and she brought all of his things. I saw that amongst them was his notebook, and was going to ask him to let me look at it. For I knew that I might find some clues to his trouble, but I suppose he must have seen the wish in my eyes, for he sent me over to the window, saying he wanted me to be quite alone. He wanted to be quite alone for a moment, and he called me back. When he came, his hand over the notebook, he said to me very solemnly, Wilhelmina. I knew then that he was dreadfully earnest. He was in deadly earnest, for he was never called me by that name since he asked me to marry him. You know, my dear, ideas of the trust between husband and wife, there should be no secret, no concealment. I have had a great shock, and when I tried to think of what it was, I feel my head spin around. I do not know if it was real or the dreaming of a madman. You know, I have had brain fever, and that is to be mad. A secret is here that I do not want to know it. I want to take up my life here with our marriage. For my dear, we had decided to be married as soon as the formalities are complete. Are you willing, Wilhelmina, to share my ignorance? Here's the book. Take it and keep it. read it if you will, but never let me know, unless indeed some solemn duty should come upon me, to go back to the bitter hours, asleep or awake, sane or mad, recorded here. He fell back exhausted, and I put the book under his pillow and kissed him. I have asked Sister Agatha to beg under the Superior to let our wedding be this afternoon, and I am waiting her reply. She has come and told me that the chaplain of English Mission Church has sent for. We are to be married in an hour as soon as Jonathan awakes. Lucy, the time has come again. The time has come and gone. I feel very solemn, but very, very happy. Jonathan woke a little after the hour, and all was ready and sat up amid his bed, propped up with pillows. He answered his "I will" firmly and strongly, and I could hardly speak. My heart was so full that even those words seemed to choke. My dear sisters were so kind. Please, God, I shall never forget them, nor the grave the responsibilities I've taken upon me. I must tell you my wedding present. When the chaplain and the sisters had left me alone with my husband. Oh, Lucy, this is the first time I have written the words, my husband. Left me alone with my husband, and I took the book from under his pillow, and wrapped it in white paper, and tied it to a little bit of pale blue ribbon which was around my neck, and sealed over the knot with the sealing wax. And for my seal, I used my wedding ring, and I kissed it, and showed it to my husband. I told him that I would keep it, and that it would be an outward and visible sign for us all our lives. He trusted that we trusted each other, and I would never open it unless it were for his own dear sake, and for the sake of some stern duty. Then he took my hand in his, and oh, Lucy, it was the first time he took his wife's hand. It was the dearest thing in the world. That he would go through all the past again to win it, if need be. The poor dear meant to have said such a thing. The poor dear meant to have said a part of the past, but he cannot think of the time yet. I shall not wonder if at first he mixes up not only the months, but the year. Well, my dear, what could I say? I can only tell him that I was the happiest woman in all the wide world, and I had nothing to give him except my life and my trust. And that with all these years, my love and duty for all the days of my life. And my dear, when he kissed me and drew me to him, his poor weak hands was like very solemn pledge between us. Lucy dear, do you know why I tell you all of this? It is not only because it is all sweet to me, but because you have been and are very dear to me. It was my privilege to be your friend and guide when you came from the schoolroom to prepare for the world of life. I want to see you now and see with the eyes of a very happy wife. Whither duty has led me in your own married life, you too may be happy as I am. My dear, please Almighty God, your life may be it promises a long day of sunshine with no harsh wind, no forgetting, no duty, no distrust. I must not wish you no pain, for that I can never be, but do hope you will be always as happy as I am now. Goodbye, my dear. I shall post this once, and perhaps write to you very soon. I must stop, for Jonathan is waking, and I must attend to my husband. Your ever-loving Mina Harker. Letter. Lucy Westerna to Mina Harka. Whitby, 30 August. My dearest Mina, oceans of love and millions of kisses. And may you soon be in your own home with your husband. I wish you could be coming home soon, enough to stay with us here. A strong air would soon restore Jonathan. It has quite restored me, and I have an appetite like a cormorant, and full of life, and sleep well. You will be glad to know that I have quite given up walking in my sleep. I think I have not stirred out of my bed for a week. That is, I once got into it at night. Arthur says I am quite getting... I have not stirred out of my bed for a week. That is, when once I got into it at night. Arthur says I'm getting fat. By the way, I forgot to tell you that Arthur is here. We have such walks and drives and rides, rowing and tennis and fishing together. And I love him more than ever. He tells me that he loves me more, but I doubt that. For at first he told me he couldn't love me more than he did then. But this is nonsense. There, he is calling me. He's calling to me, so no more at present, for we are loving. Lucy. Mother sends her love. She seems better, poor dear. We are to be married on the 28th of September. Dr. Seward's diary. 20th of August. The case of Renfield grows even more interesting. He has now so far quieted that there are spells of secession from his passion. For the first week after his attack, he was perpetually violent. Then one night, just as the moon rose, he grew quiet and kept murmuring to himself, "Now I can wait. Now I can wait." The attendant came to tell me, so I ran down at once to have a look at him. He was still in the straight waistcoat and in the padded room. A suffused look has gone from his face and his eyes. He had something of their old pleading, I might almost say cringing, softness. I was satisfied with his present condition and directed him to be relieved. The attendant hesitated, but finally carried out my wishes without protest. It was a strange thing that the patient had humor enough to see their distrust for coming close to me, he said in a whisper, all the while looking furtively at them. They think I could hurt you. Fancy me hurting you, the fools. They think I could hurt you. Fancy me hurting you, the fools. It was soothing somehow, the feelings to find myself dissociated, even in the mind of this poor madman, from the others. But at the same time, I did not follow his thought. Am I to take it that I have anything in common with him, so that we are, as it were, to stand together? Or has he to gain from me so good, so stupendous, that my well-being is needful to him? I must find out later on. Tonight he will not speak. Even the offer of a kitten or of even a full-grown cat will not tempt him. He will only say, I don't take any stock in cats. I have more to think of now. I can wait. I can wait. After a while, I left him. The attendant tells me that he was quiet until just before dawn. And then he began to get uneasy, and at length violent. Until at last he fell into a paroxysm, which exhausted him so that he swooned into a sort of a coma. 3 nights has the same thing happened. Violent all night, and then quiet from the moonrise. I wish I could get some clues to the cause. It would almost seem as if there was some influence which came and went. Happy though. We shall tonight play sane wits against mad ones. He escaped before without our help. Tonight he shall escape with it. We shall give him a chance and have the men ready to follow him in case they are required. August 23rd. The unexpected always happens. How well Disraeli knew life. Our bird, when he fought the cage open, would not fly, so all our subtle arrangements were for naught. At any rate, we have proved one thing, that spells of quietness last a reasonable time. We shall in future be able to ease his bonds for a few hours each day. I have given orders to the night attendant merely to shut him in the padded room when once he is quiet until an hour before sunrise. The poor soul's body will enjoy the relief, even if his mind cannot appreciate it. Hark! The unexpected again. I am called. The patient has once more escaped. Later, another night adventure. Renfield artfully waited until the attendant was entering the room to inspect. Then he dashed out past against and flew down the passage. I sent word for the attendants to follow. Again, he went into the grounds of the deserted house, and found him in the same place, pressed against the old chapel door. When he saw me, he became furious, and had not the attendant seized him in time, he would have tried to kill me. As if he were holding him when a strange thing happened. He suddenly redoubled his efforts, and then suddenly he grew calm. I looked around instinctively, but could see nothing. The night caught the patient's eye and followed it, but could trace nothing as I looked into the moonlit sky except a big bat, which was flapping its silent and ghostly white to the west. Bats usually wheel and flit about, but this one seemed to go straight on as if it were bound for or had some intention of its own. The patient grew calmer every instant and presently said, "You needn't tie me. I shall go quietly, without trouble." We came back to the house. And I feel there is something ominous in his calm, and shall not forget this night. August 25th. Another bad night. Mother did not seem to take... Oh, I skipped one. Lucy Westerna's diary. Hillingham, 24th of August. I must imitate Mina and try and keep writing things down. Then we can have long talks when we do not meet. I wonder when it will be. I wish you were here with me again, for I feel so unhappy. Last night I seemed to be dreaming again, just as I was at Whitby. Perhaps it is the change of air, getting home again. It is all dark and horrid to me, for I can remember nothing, but I am full of vague fear. I feel so weak and worn out. When Arthur came to lunch, he looked quite grieved when he saw me. I hadn't the spirit to try to be cheerful. I wonder if I could sleep in Mother's room tonight. I shall make an excuse and try. 25th of August. Another bad night. Mother did not seem to take my proposal. She seems not too well herself, and doubtless she fears to worry me. I tried to keep awake and succeeded for a while, but when the clock struck 12, it waked me from a doze, so I must have been falling asleep. There was a sort of scratching or flapping at the window, but I did not mind it. And as I remember no more, I suppose I must have been falling asleep. More bad dreams. I wish I could remember them. This morning I'm horribly weak. My face is ghastly pale. My throat pains me. There must be something wrong with my lungs, for I don't seem to ever get air enough. I shall try to cheer up when Arthur comes, or else I know he will be miserable to see me so. My dear Jack, I want you to do me a favor. Lucy is ill. That is, she has no special disease, but she looks awful, and she is getting worse every day. I have asked her if there is any cause. I do not dare ask her mother, for to disturb the poor lady's mind about her daughter in her present state of health would be fatal. Mrs. Westerna has confided to me that her doom is spoken, disease of the heart, though poor Lucy does not know it yet. I am sure that there is something preying on my dear girl's mind. I am almost distracted when I think of her to look at her. It gives me a pang. I told her I should ask you to see her, and though she may be demurred at first, I know why. Old fellow. She finally consented. It would be a painful task for her. I know, old friend, but it is for her sake. I must not hesitate for you to act. You are to come to lunch at Hillingham tomorrow. 2 o'clock, so as not to arouse any suspicion. And Mrs. Westerna, and after lunch, Lucy will take an opportunity of being alone with you. I shall come in for tea, and we can go away together. I am filled with anxiety, and want to consult her with you as soon as I can after you have seen her. Do not fail. Telegram. Arthur Holmwood to Seward. Am summoned to see my father, who is worse. Am writing. Write me fully by tonight's post to ring. Wire me if necessary. Letter from Dr. Seward to Arthur Holmwood. Second of September. With my regard to Miss Westerner's health, I hasten to let you know at once that in my opinion there is not any functional disturbance or any malady that I know of. At the same time, I am not by any means satisfied with her appearance. She is woefully different from what she had when I saw her last. Of course, you must bear in mind that I do not have full opportunity of examination as I should wish. Our very friendship makes a little difficulty which not even medical science or custom can bridge over. I had better tell you exactly what happened, leaving you to draw in a measure your own conclusions. I shall then say what I have done and propose doing. I found Miss Westerner in seemingly gay spirits. Her mother was present, and in a few seconds I made up my mind that she was trying all she knew to mislead her mother and prevent her from falling anxious. I have no doubt she guesses, if she does not know, what heat of caution there is. We lunched alone, and we all exerted ourselves to be cheerful. We got, as some kind of reward for our labors, some real cheerfulness among us. Then Mrs. Westerner went to lie down, and Lucy was left with me. We went into her boudoir until we got there. Her gaiety remained, for the servants were coming and going. As soon as the door was closed, however, the mask fell from her face, and she sank down into a chair with a great sigh and hid her eyes with her hands. When I saw that her high spirits had failed, I at once took advantage of her reaction and made a diagnosis. She said to me very sweetly, "I cannot tell you how I loathe talking about myself." I reminded her that a doctor's confidence was sacred, but you were grievously anxious about her. She caught on to my meaning at once, and settled that matter in a word. "Tell Arthur everything you choose. I do not care for myself, but all for him, so I am quite free." I could see that she is somewhat bloodless, but I could not see the usual anemic signs, and by chance he was actually able to test the quality of her blood. For an opening a window, which was a stiff cord, gave way, and she cut her hand slightly with broken glass. It was a slight matter in itself, but it gave me an evident chance, and I secured a few drops of blood, and I have analyzed them. The qualitative analysis gave quite a normal condition and shows I should infer in itself a vigorous state of health. In other physical matters, I was quite satisfied that there was no need for anxiety, but there must be a cause somewhere. I have come to the conclusion that it must be something mental. She complains of difficulty in breathing satisfactorily, and of heavy lethargic sleep, with dreams that frighten her, but regarding which she can remember nothing. She says that as a child she used to walk in her sleep, out in the night, and went to East Cliff when Mrs. Murray found her, but she assures me that of late the habit has not returned. I am in doubt, and so have done the best thing I know of. I have written to my old friend and master, Professor Van Helsing of Amsterdam. He knows as much about obscure diseases as anyone in the world. I have asked him to come over, and as you told me, that all things were at your charge. I have mentioned to him that who you are and your relations to Miss Westerna. This, my dear fellow, is in obedience to your wishes, for I am only too proud and happy to do anything I can for her. Van Helsing would, I know, do anything for me and for a personal reason. So no matter what ground he comes, we must accept his wishes. He is a singularly arbitrary man, but this is because he knows what he was talking about better than anyone else. He is a philosopher and a metaphysician, and one of the most advanced scientists of his day. And he has, I believe, an absolutely open mind. This with an iron nerve, a temper of the icebrook, an indomitable resolution and self-command, and a toleration exalted from virtues to blessings, and the kindliest, truest heart that beats each form of his equipment for the noble work that he is doing for mankind, work in both theory and practice for his views, as wide as his all-embracing sympathy. I tell you these facts that you may know why I have such confidence in him. I have asked him to come at once. I shall see Miss Westerner tomorrow again. She is to meet me at the stores, so I may not alarm her mother, with too early repetition of my call. Yours always, John Seward. Abraham Van Helsing, MDD, PhD, etc., etc. To Dr. Seward. My good friend, I have received your letter. I am already coming to you. By good fortune, I can leave just at once without wrong to any of those who have trusted me. Were fortune other, then it were bad for those who have trusted me. I come, my friend, when you call me to aid those he holds dear. Tell me, your friend, that when time you suck from my wound, so swiftly the poison of the gangrene from life that our other friend, too nervous, let slip. You did more for him than he wants. My aids and you call for him. And all this great fortune I could do, but this pleasure added to do for him, your friend. It is to you that I come. Have then rooms for me at the Great Eastern Hotel, so that I may be near to hand, and please it, so arrange that I may see the young lady not too late on tomorrow, for it is likely that I may have to return here that night. But if need be, I shall come again in 3 days, and stay longer if I must. Till then, goodbye, my dear friend John Van Helsing. Van Helsing has come and gone. He came on with me to Hillingham, and found that, by Lucy's discretion, her mother was lunching out, so that we were left alone with her. Van Helsing made a very careful examination of the patient. He used to report to me, and I shall advise you, for of course I was not present all the time. He is, I fear, much concerned, but he says he must think. When I told him of our friendship and how you must trust me in the matter, he said, "You must tell him all you think. Tell him what I think. If you can guess it. If you will. Nay, I am not jesting. This is no jest. But life and death, perhaps more." I asked what he meant by that, for he was very serious. This was when he had come back to town, and was having a cup of tea before starting on his return to Amsterdam. He would not give any further clues. You must not be angry with me, Art, because in his very reticence means that all his brains are working good for her. Good. He will speak plainly enough when the time comes, be sure. So I told him I would simply write an account of our visit, and of our doing a descriptive article for the Daily Telegram. He seemed to not notice, but remarked that the smuts in London were not quite so bad as they used to be when he was a student here. I am to get his report tomorrow, if he can possibly make it. In any case, I am to have a letter. How much longer is left? Well, not that bad. After this chapter, I'll end it. Well, as to the visit, Lucy was more cheerful on that day. On the day I first saw her. And certainly looked better. She had lost something of the ghastly look that so upset you, and her breathing was normal. She's very sweet to that professor, as she always is, and tried to make him feel at ease. Though I could see that the poor girl was making a hard struggle for it. I believe Van Helsing saw it too. For I saw the quick look under his bushy brows that I knew of old. Then he began to chat. Of all things except ourselves and diseases, and with such an infinite geniality that I could see the poor Lucy's present pretense of animation merge into reality. Then without any seeming change, he brought the conversation gently round to his visit, and suavely said, "My dear young miss, I have this so great pleasure because you are so much beloved, that this much, my dear, ever were that which I do not see. They told me you were down in the spirits, and that you were ghastly pale. To them I say, puff." And then he snapped his fingers at me, and went on, "But you, I shall show you them how wrong they are." "How can he?" And he pointed at me, and with the same look and gesture as that which one he pointed me out to his class on, or rather after a peculiar occasion which he never fails to remind me of. Know anything of young ladies? He had his madmen to play with, and to bring them back to happiness. And to those that love them, it is much ado. Oh, but there are rewards in that we come to sow such happiness. All the young ladies, he has no wife nor daughter, and the young do not help themselves to the young, but to the old, like me, who have known so many sorrows and the causes of them. So, my dear, we will send them away to smoke a cigarette in the garden, whilst you and I have little talk to ourselves. I took the hint and strolled back about, and presently the professor came to the window and called to me. He looked grave, but said, "I have made careful examination, but there is no functional cause with you. I agree that there has been much blood loss. It has been, but it is not. But the condition of her are in no way anemic. I have asked her to send me her maid, that I may ask just 1 or 2 questions. And yet there is cause. There is always cause for everything. I must go back home and think. You must send me to the telegram every day. And there be cause, I shall come again. The disease for not be all well is a disease. Interests me, and the sweetest young dear. She interests me too. She charmed me, and for her, if not for you or disease, I come. Dr. Seward's diary. 4th September. Zoophagus patient still keeps up our interest in him. He had only 1 outburst, and that was yesterday, at an unusual time. Just before the stroke of noon, he began to grow restless. The attendant knew of the symptoms, and at once summoned aid. Fortunately, the men came at a run and were just in time, for at the stroke of noon he became so violent that it took all the strength to hold him. In about 5 minutes, however, he began to get more and more quiet, and finally sank into a sort of melancholy, in which state he was remained up to now. The attendant tells me that his screams whilst in paroxysm were greatly appalling. I found in my hands, when I go on attending, to see some of the other patients who are frightened by him. Indeed, I can understand the effects, for the sounds disturbed even me, though I was in some distance away. It is now after the dinner hour of the asylum, and as yet my patient sits in a corner, brooding with a dull, sullen, woe-begone look on his face, which seems rather to indicate that this shows something directly. I cannot quite understand it. Later, another change in my patient at 5 o'clock. I looked in on him and found him seemingly happy and contented as he used to be. He was catching flies and eating them, and he was keeping note of his capture by making nail marks on the edge of the door between the ridges of padding. When he saw me, he came over and apologized for his bad conduct, and asked me in a very humble, cringing way to be led back to his own room, and to have his notebook again. I thought it well to humor him, so he is back in his room, the windows open. He has the sugar of his tea spread out on the windowsill, and he is reaping quite a harvest of flies. He is now eating them, but he is not now eating them, putting them into a box, as though old. He is already examining the corners of his room to find a spider. I tried to get him to talk about the past few days, for any clue to his thoughts would be of immense help, but he would not rise. For a moment or two he looked very sad, and said in sort of a faraway voice, as though saying it rather to himself. All over, he has deserted me. No hope for me now unless I do it for myself. Then suddenly, turning to me in a resolute way, he said, "Doctor, won't you be very good to me and let me have a little more sugar? I think it would be good for me. And the flies? Yes, the flies like it too. And I like the flies, therefore I like it." And there were people who know so very little as to think that madmen do not argue. I procured him a double supply and left him as happy as a man as, I suppose, anything in the world. I wish I could fathom his mind. Midnight. Another change in him. I had been to see Miss Westerno, who I found much better and had just returned, and just standing at her own gate, looking at the sunset, when once more I heard him yelling, as his room is on the side of the house. I could hear it better than in the morning. It was a shock to me, a turn from the wonderful smoky beauty of sunset over London, with its lurid lights and inky shadows, and all the marvelous tints that come on foul clouds, even as foul water, as to realize all the grim sternness of my own cold stone building, with its wealth of breathing misery, on my own desolate heart to endure. All I reached him as the sun going down, and from his window, saw the red disk sink. As it sank, it became less and less frenzied, and as it dripped down from the hands that held him, he became less and less frenzied, and just as it dipped, he slid from the hands that held him in an inert mass on the floor. It is wonderful, however, what intellectual recuperative power lunatics have. For within a few minutes, he stood up quite calmly and looked around him. I signaled to the attendants not to hold him, for I was anxious to see what he would do. He went straight over to the window and brushed out the crumbs of sugar, then took out his fly box and emptied it outside and threw away the box. Then he shut the window, and the crossing over, sat down on his bed. All this surprised me, so I asked him, "Are you not going to keep flies anymore?" "No," he said. "I am sick of all that rubbish." He certainly is a wonderful and interesting study. I wish I could get some glimpse of his mind, or the cause of his sudden passion. Stop. There may be a clue after all. If we can find why today his paroxysms came on in high noon and at sunset, can it be that there is a line of influence of the sun, or at periods which affect certain natures? As at times the moon does others? We shall see. Telegram. Seward, London to Van Helsing, Amsterdam. 4th September. Patient still better today. Seward to London to Van Helsing, Amsterdam. Patiently greatly improved. Great appetite. Sleeps naturally. Good spirits. Color coming back. 6th of September. Terrible change for the worse. Come at once. Do not lose an hour. I hold over telegram to Homewood till I've seen you. ここで終わります。Next time will be, I think this is chapter 10. 今日も見てくれてありがとうございます。次回も見に来てくれるとありがたい。Thank you for watching today, and I hope watching next time too. Gracias por mirar. Espero que venga a ver en la próxima vez. Tomorrow will be music. Maybe 2 p.m. Thank you for watching and thank you for lurking. Trying to figure out how long this book is. It's maybe like third done, I think. では、終了。お疲れ。バイバイ。